welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into what may be the final Gamecock Pod Live for 2024. Today is December the 18th. I am Keith Alsep, and we have got a great show planned for episode number 1658 of Gamecock Pod Daily and Gamecock Pod Live. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by our good friend Alex Jones from the BigSpur.com to get all the latest on the transfer portal. We'll also get his take on some of the Gamecock signees that are at the Shrine Bowl. We'll also discuss the contract extensions and get into some new assignments for Gamecock assistants. But first, let's jump right into our Nana's Porch news notes and headlines, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte-Fort Mill area, Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash. Get on the calendar. Nana's Porch has got you covered. All you have to do is go to the website, nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him the Cockfather sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. And even if you don't have a catering event coming up, go to the homepage and order some of Nana's Porch award-winning and absolutely delicious pimento cheese. All you have to do is click on pimento cheese up in the right-hand corner of the homepage. It'll take you to a hyperlink where you can order both flavors, the smoky jalapeno and the great regular flavor, and have it shipped directly to your front doorstep, absolutely free of charge. I spoke with Chris earlier this morning. They just delivered a fresh batch of pimento cheese that's going to be boxed up today and ready to roll, to go out. Order today. You'll have it in plenty of time for Christmas, plenty of time for your watch parties. Order it today. You'll have it on Friday, and you'll have it in time for all of the first round college football playoff games. So again, nanasporch.com. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right. Last night, South Carolina continues their domination over Clemson, upsetting number 25 Clemson in men's basketball 91-88 in overtime to move to 8-3 on the season. They also got their first quad one win. A very exciting game that was marred by some really shitty officiating, quite frankly. Gamecocks were led by Colin Murray Boyles, who had 22 points on 9. Well, let me get to it. Let's go to home stats. Colin Murray Boyles, 22 points, 8 of 10 from the field, 6 of 6 from the free throw line, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 block shots. And he absolutely got in perfect position to draw a charge. And they called a block. Nick Pringle showed up big, as did Miles Studi. We'll get into all of that and more. But let's go ahead and bring in the man with the plan. Good morning to you, William. Good morning to everybody watching live this morning. And good morning, Alex. How are you holding up?
Good morning. How you doing? Good to be back with you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like really anything's happened since Thanksgiving. So I know it's been a breeze for you guys at the Big Spur, right?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. I'm not quite sure a breeze is the right way to put it, but
maybe a tornado.
Happen. Yeah.
All right, so top of the morning to you, Dr. Cooper, as well. Got a bunch of folks joining us online today. So, Alex, Gamecocks officially named Mike Shula as offensive coordinator, and he gets a 3-year deal worth, I think, $1.1 million for each year of the deal. But every other assistant got at least a 1-year contract extension, and I think got raises yesterday. Give us all the latest and your thoughts. This is unusual. Usually this is after the bowl game or after recruiting in February when you're getting ready to go into spring practice. Very unusual to do it now in December.
Yeah, I think it's just the timing of it all. It was pretty interesting. I think they wanted to go ahead and get it done, especially these days with the transfer portal and recruiting. You want to, have these coaches locked down, and for recruits to see that, these guys, they're, the importance that these guys have, and, these guys they're playing to keep these guys around for a long time. And you mentioned, Mike Shula, obviously the news is already out that he was going to be the new offensive coordinator of South Carolina, but it was officially announced yesterday. And I think that's throughout everybody expected to go. And personally, I think that was the best choice from what what Shane Beamer could have done. You look at what Mike Shula did with Lenora Sellers this year. Obviously, Dow Loggins played a key part in that too, but Mike Shula is the guy who's sitting there on the sidelines with him every time. You can watch on TV every time Lenora comes off the field. Mike Shula is one of the first ones there to grab him. And, I think it's just, I think he helped develop Lenora. And I think, Shane Beamer has shown that he's big on continuity at South Carolina. And I think that's going to allow him to do that. That's going to continue that continuity with Mike Shula being there, and kind of helps with some terminology and things. But, I think it was a good move by South Carolina. And then, a good move to go ahead and get all those guys locked in from assistant coach's standpoint.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, when you look at Mike Shula, this is a guy that not only did he play quarterback at Alabama, not only is he the son of Don Shula, the winningest coach in the history of the National Football League and coach of the Miami Dolphins Super Bowl team, which was the last undefeated NFL team. And I think that was in like 1974. Okay, so 50 years, not a single team has gone unbeaten. He coached at Alabama. He's recruited. He spent 30 years in the National Football League, Tampa Bay, Miami, Chicago, back with Tampa Bay with the Dolphins, then head coach at Alabama. Coached for 3 years with Jacksonville, worked with Cam Newton and with the Panthers, and Daniel Jones with the New York Giants. Most recently, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills before joining the Gamecocks. He brings a wealth of experience. And, when Dow Loggins got hired, there was a lot of criticism because of his track record in the NFL and he had never done it in college. Mike Shula's track record in the National Football League is, a much better looking resume. A guy that was born into football royalty, played at Alabama, coached at Alabama, now the offensive coordinator at South Carolina. And I'm with you. If I know there was a lot of interest in this thing, but to me, you have a tight window with Lenora Sellers, maybe only one more year, hopefully 2 more years.
Mm-hmm.
You got to maximize that. And I think, Lenoris was fully on board, and, you've got all these big time wide receivers that are joining the team for bowl practice. I mean, I don't think we knew all of them were joining the team. We knew Malik Clark, and I believe Jaden Sellers were going to join, but Lex Cyrus and Jordan Gidron and Brian Rowe. So you got 5 new receivers. You don't want them to go through bowl practice. Then you hire a new offensive coordinator, and then everybody's starting from scratch. So I think it's a really great hire, and you're absolutely correct. Shane Beamer loves continuity, and Clayton White, a guy who was on the ropes last year, he joins the $2 million club. He got a 3-year deal starting at 1.9 and going up $100,000 over the course of the contract. So it will be 1.9, 2 million, and 2.1 million. That's not bad. And he certainly had his best year with the Gamecocks this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he absolutely deserved that raise and extension he got. Think about what this defense did this year. He played a key part in helping keep some of these guys together. Think of some of the guys who could have left after last season. Shane Beamer's kind of talked about this after a 5-7 season. Some guys could have left, but they kept these guys all together, and they had a heck of a season on that side of the ball, and well deserved. For him to get that type of raise, again, it shows with the assistant coaches' extensions and raises. It shows, South Carolina's serious about, getting these guys paid and for what they deserve, and that's huge for down the road when you're having to find new coaches. Coaches are going to recognize that if you come in and do your job, Shane Beamer and board of trustees and the staff, they'll take care of you from that standpoint. So I think it's just a good sign for South Carolina moving forward.
No doubt. Also, wide receivers coach Mike Furry awarded the title of pass game coordinator. That gives him a title and a little more on his contract. Torian Gray bumped up to $850,000 a year. For my money, that dude's the best defensive backs coach in the country. And Sterling Lucas bumped up to $775,000 per year. I like the timing of this because, like you said, the transfer portal is open. And having said that, perfect segue. Gamecocks picked up 2 portal commitments over the weekend and appear to be poised to pick up maybe 2 or 3 more here at the end of this week. Defensive end Jalen Brown from Missouri, a native of Alabama that South Carolina was involved with last year. Kind of a late riser, but rose up the rankings, wound up like number 124, number 129 in the country, 6'6", 265. Quick twitch edge player with 4 to play 3. Very heavily recruited, and the Gamecocks add him. Your thoughts on the addition of Jalen Brown?
Yeah, it seemed like it came together really quickly for South Carolina, especially those 2 commitments. We knew about Nick Sharp beforehand. I'm not jumping ahead here, but to get those 2 commits was a good start for South Carolina. But specifically with Jalen Brown, he's a guy you mentioned, kind of a late riser in high school, a guy who really shot up the rankings with a strong senior season. And South Carolina did like him out of high school, but he committed to Missouri, and he was with that commitment. But, Sterling Lucas and those guys really, really like, Jalen Brown. And, when you think about what Sterling Lucas, we've seen now that he knows what he's looking for in these edge guys. And Jalen Brown, I think from a size standpoint, kind of looks just like what they're looking for in that spot. And he's a guy who, I think was just behind a few guys at Missouri. Missouri still had some talented edge rushers this year, and he was just behind a few guys. But it sounds like he was starting to come along there middle of the season, going to late season. So I think this we'll see who else South Carolina lands, but it could end up being one of the more under the radar picks for South Carolina's transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him and you look at Dylan Stewart, who's easily 6'6". I didn't realize, I think Kyle Kennard, I know they list him at 6'5". I think he's probably 6'4". We'll find out at the combine. By the way, named All-American, first team All-SEC, Kyle Kennard, and the winner of the Bronco Nagurski Award, given annually to the top defensive player in the country. I couldn't believe after he beats Abdul Carter for that award, they put Carter on the AP first team All-America and Kennard on the second team. I didn't really like that. But, that gives you two sophomore bookends to really build your defense around. And look, there are other guys that are back. Okay, I'm not throwing dirt on JT Gear, Des Umeazulu, Brian Thomas Jr. Those guys can play. South Carolina has some, I think, very intriguing edge rushers and linebackers that are coming in. But I love the pickup of Jalen Brown. He'll be in for spring practice, and, there's going to be open competition. And, hey, I don't know that South Carolina is necessarily done at that edge position. I did want to ask you about a couple of other guys. This one courtesy of your cohort at the Big Spur, Hale McGranahan, Cameron Olds, 6'4", 240 from Kent State. He's a native of Richmond, Virginia. We know the Gamecocks love recruiting the state of Virginia. Very productive guy. He's a guy that South Carolina could bring in on a visit. And then a familiar name, Thomaston, Georgia edge TJ Searcy, 6'5.5", 250. Really came down to South Carolina and Florida on him. Gamecocks had him in for an official visit. He picked Florida. He's in the portal. And so Clayton White and Sterling Lucas may not be done at that edge position, as I think they want to try to replicate what they did in the transfer portal last year to really get this defense the best chance to be another top third or top half of the league defense in 2025 with what should be a dynamic offense with Lenore Sellers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting with that edge spot, what they're going to do, because they obviously got Jalen Brown already, in the class. And, do they go out? It looks like they're all going to go after one more. And I don't blame them, especially, especially if you can find the right fit for a guy, because you mentioned some of the guys they have coming back who have a lot of potential. Des I think, was a guy who, saw a little bit more time this year, but I thought physically he looked like he took a big jump from year one to year two and could be in for a bigger year next year. Brian Thomas Jr., guys like that who are still coming back and could be great pieces of South Carolina. But from a transfer portal standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see how they fill out that edge room. You mentioned Cameron Olds, a guy at Kent State who he looks like a guy. Again, we kind of say it with some of these other guys, but looks like a guy they look for at that edge spot. 6'4", 240 guy. Started at Buffalo, ended up at Kent State. A guy this year who had 42 tackles with 7 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. And I know it's different levels, but when we look back to what Kyle Kennard did last year at Georgia Tech before he came to South Carolina, it was around those same kind of statistics. 6 sacks, and then just kind of say, what we saw in film. We thought he could get to that next level in that double-digit sacks, and sure enough, he did. So I'm really intrigued by Cameron Olds to see how that comes along. And then TJ Searcy, haven't heard one way or the other too much on what's going to happen there from a South Carolina standpoint with him, but a guy that you mentioned South Carolina's very familiar with from the recruiting process, and a guy who I think could come right in and fit right in, just like with Olds and the rest of these guys.
No doubt. So, William, be patient. We're going to talk about tight end in just a second. I think Alex and I would both agree with all the guys that are going out, they do need depth. So you'll return Michael Smith. You'll return Brady Hunt, Maurice Brown. Okay, you signed Mike Tyler. You flipped him from LSU, but I do think they want to add one. I think right now that is trending towards Jordan Dingle, who has family from South Carolina, played at Kentucky, 6'4", 245, a guy that looks like a natural pass catcher, but, you know, when you have Barry and Brown and Dane Key and those other receivers and the way they like to run the ball, he kind of got lost in the numbers. His best year was 2 years ago when he had 22 receptions. I think he's a kind of an under-the-radar guy that in South Carolina's current system, with the emphasis on tight ends, I think could be a very productive player should he choose South Carolina. I think, you know, if he was a stock right now, the arrows would be trending up towards the Gamecocks.
Yeah, he's a very intriguing player. You know, kind of interested following him through his time at Kentucky. You mentioned what he did 2 years ago. I think it was 64 catch or 12 catches for 270 yards as a sophomore. And this year at Kentucky, they had so many issues at quarterback. They just couldn't get it quite figured out there. And I think that maybe kind of led to that. But he's also a willing blocker, which is, you know, I think very important in what we saw in this offense. You know, a guy who's 6'2", 242, 6'4", 242. So I think he would fit right in. And I think, you know, they found a way to land Dingle. You know, I think they would probably call it a day there, that tight end, just because of what they have back. Maybe if they find a right fit there, they find one more guy. You know, obviously they're going after Zach Atkins, but he committed to Colorado yesterday or the day before. So, you know, I think, you know, from it seems like, you know, who we don't know, maybe there's somebody else out there they're looking at, but it seems like Jordan Dingle is one that they're kind of keying in on to see if they can land.
I mean, I agree. I could also see Ball State tight end Tanner Koziel, who was the former teammate of Brady Hunt, 6'7", 235. He had 94 receptions. I think he's in the portal. I think that could be a guy if you don't, you know, land Dingle. But I just want to caution everybody. Don't get caught up. Don't get depressed every time you see a name like Dane Key go off the board. Because the portal, yes, it's open for 10 more days. But then, you know what? Then the best teams that are playing in the bowl games after December 28th, all their players have 5 days after the conclusion of their bowl game to get in the transfer portal. So there are going to be guys getting in the transfer portal all the way up until mid-January. So while it may say 10 days, we've got, I don't know what the last day to enroll for the spring semester is at South Carolina, but you will literally, there will be guys available and in the transfer portal up until the very last day to enroll for the spring semester. So I just caution everybody to chill out. Nick Sharp, it looks like they identified him and went hard after him and got him on board. This guy's played a ton of snaps at Wake Forest. 6'2", 330. He's going to project to one of those guard spots. And he's got 2 years of eligibility left due to a medical red shirt. But I always look at this. If the pit boss, Sam Pittman, is recruiting you to play offensive line, you're pretty damn good. And so Nick Sharp, one of the highest rated interior offensive linemen by Pro Football Focus, he came on board about an hour or two after Jaylen Brown was announced. How do you see Nick Sharp fitting in?
Yeah, he's a guy who I think could fit right into that right guard spot for Torricelli Simpkins, or maybe if they want to move him to left guard. But obviously losing Torricelli, they need a replacement there, and they still have some guys on the roster who could fit into that guard spot. But Shane Beamer always talks about competition, and I mean, this guy bring competition, but and has I think a good chance to start too. I mean, as you mentioned, played a lot of football at Wake Forest. The guy's a really good player who has a few years of eligibility, which I think is key too. So I mean, it was really interesting with him. I was wondering, how quickly his recruitment was going to go, if he's going to take more visits, but sounded like he liked what he heard from South Carolina, and South Carolina got the job done quickly with him. And I think that's, he and Jalen Brown obviously being the first two, we'll see who else they get in this portal, but those two guys being the first two, they can maybe be the most under the radar type of pickups with who will compare with who they get. But I think it's a solid first two commitments so far for South Carolina in the portal.
I agree. I think, Michigan transfer center Dominic Giddis, 6'5", 300. He just wrapped up his visit. I think I'm not calling that one, but I think the Gamecocks have an excellent shot here because he started multiple games at Michigan. He's kind of been a utility guy, but he's played a ton of football. 3-time All Big Ten academic guy, very smart, very cerebral. South Carolina has a dire need at center. How do you think things are trending with Dominic Giddis from Michigan?
Yeah, it sounds like things went very well in the visit, and things are trending well for South Carolina. You had to say there in the transfer portal, you never know, just because things can change so quickly. But it does seem like things went well for him, and that's a spot. Center's a spot that they're going to have to replace with Rashawn Lee using his last year of eligibility this year. And I think he's the guy who could, at the very least, come in and compete. Maybe does well enough to land that spot, but I think he could be one that slides right into there. And a guy who, another one kind of same with Sharp, has 2 years of eligibility, and that's key. It was great. It's great to get the guys like the Kamar Bell and Torricelli Simpkins who have a year and came in and for the most part played pretty well. But these guys who they're targeting have 2 years left and could have 2 years under Lonnie Teasley, and so I think those guys come and compete right away and make a name for themselves at South Carolina.
No doubt. So it does appear Justice Haynes, a former 5-star running back at Alabama, will visit tomorrow. I think it was supposed to be earlier in the week. He went to Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they just took, Missouri's best young running back, who was a 4-star guy. I think the Gamecocks have a great story to tell with him. Buford, Georgia, same school as incoming linebacker A.J. Holloway, who I really like as a big middle linebacker, as a thumper. They know each other. This guy was unbelievable in high school, over 7,700 yards and just tons of touchdowns, one of the most successful programs in Georgia. It looks like he will be on campus, and Horatio Fields, 6'3", 205, a Wake Forest transfer. Gamecocks already have one Wake Forest transfer, and their head coach just stepped down, so it's going to be open season for the Demon Deeks in the transfer portal. Gamecocks desperately, I think, need to add an outside experienced wide receiver, a bigger body type of guy. Horatio Fields fits that mold. Very productive. This year's a true sophomore. That's another guy that would have 2 more years of eligibility. And Justice Haynes, I believe, was a redshirt freshman at Alabama this year. He would have 3 years. I think these two guys could really be huge on the offensive side of the ball for Lenora Sellers. And again, I think Lenora Sellers, Josiah Thompson, I mean, you've got some plenty of returning offensive linemen to sell these guys on, and they can see what Rocket Sanders did this year with over 1,000 yards of total offense. By the way, Rocket Sanders named one of 3 comeback players of the year in college football. That was announced yesterday. He's going to the NFL draft. I mean, look, I love Jawarn Howell. I love Oscar Attaway III. I love Matthew Fuller, but that's only 3. DJ Braswell's in the portal. South Carolina did not sign a high school back. Adding Justice Haynes or another similarly profile type of guy, I think, is essential for the Gamecocks because you just don't know with injuries how it's going to go.
Yeah, I think they in this in the transfer portal cycle they have to land one running back just from what you mentioned, a number standpoint. You know, I do like Attaway and Howell and those guys, and think they can be really good. But you want to have 4 just because of that position. You know, being the one that could be prone to injuries just with how many hits you take at that position. And they I think 24/7 right now has listed as the number 1 running back in the portal. I mean, that's a huge pickup, and that'd be a great add to that room. He's a guy who, I think this year at Alabama, he was kind of battling for reps with Jam Miller for most of the year. But as you mentioned earlier, South Carolina has a lot to sell at that running back standpoint. I mean, you look what they did with Rocket Sanders this year, and he came in who was coming off injury, and he came in as named the comeback player of the year, one of the comeback players of the year yesterday. So South Carolina has a lot to sell. They have to battle a lot of schools for him, especially Ole Miss, but Ole Miss did just land Lacey from Missouri, so maybe that could be a selling point for South Carolina that he could come in and be their top running back prospect in the class. And then with Horatio Fields, I really, really like him. I think he could. You mentioned bringing a size to that room if they end up landing him. South Carolina, when you think about that, they don't have they have a little bit of that, but you think a guy like Nick Harbor, their big guy with size, and obviously Dale Von Campbell was that this year, but he's doesn't have any more eligibility. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with Fields here on this visit tomorrow. I think it's one where South Carolina really, I think he fits exactly what they're looking for in this portal, and he had a really good year this year. And it goes back to what we talked about with Sharp and these other guys. He has extra years of eligibility too, which is huge. I mean, look at what Jared Brown did this year. He came in with a few years of eligibility, had a solid year. Now he's coming back. So I think Fields would be a solid pickup if they can find a way to do that. And they'll have challenges with him too, just because of those schools that are coming after him. But I mean, South Carolina has a lot to sell from a Lenore Sellers standpoint, and just really how the offense performed there later in the season.
No doubt. So there's another Fields that just hit the transfer portal, Malachi Fields, who is Virginia's top receiver, 6'4", 220. That's another outside big-bodied receiver from the state of Virginia. Could you see the Gamecocks getting involved with this one?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we can find out if they go after Malachi Fields. He's another one. I mean, you look at his stats and had 2023, he had 811 yards receiving. 2024 had 808, 10 touchdowns combined. So a guy that's 6'4", 220, kind of what they're looking for from a size standpoint for this transfer portal spot at wide receiver. So, we'll see how things kind of work out. I think they'll kind of just get a feel here moving forward with where things stand with Fields, and maybe they still go after him because even if they land Fields, they're going to, they find another right receiver in the transfer portal, they would absolutely take him, and he could fit that bill.
I mean, no doubt about it. All right, so let's go to a couple guys who just wrapped up or who are wrapping up visits, and that is former 5-star defensive tackle Gabriel Brownlow Dindy. He went to Texas A&M. He's a native of Lakeland, Florida. Now, who do we know that's also a native of Lakeland, Florida? Oh, I know. Torian Gray. That's his hometown. And he owned that town for the most part in recruiting. A guy, again, buried behind a bunch of other dudes at Texas A&M. But, just like Monkel Goodwine, he was buried. We saw how he contributed this year at South Carolina. The word on the street is this one's looking pretty good for the Gamecocks. 6'3", about 310 with multiple years of eligibility. I think this could be really one of the linchpins for the defense because you've got to add more big bodies at defensive tackle, losing Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley, DeAndre Jules, and quite possibly TJ Sanders.
Yeah, that defensive tackle spot's a major priority in this transfer portal class, and we've seen a few guys that they've targeted at least, and this is one of those guys who I think they're going hard really after, and was obviously in for a visit. And you kind of mentioned it. He was kind of like the same kind of scenario with Monkel Goodwin, was just behind some guys on that Texas A&M roster who they always have solid defensive tackles, and he looked like he could have been next in line at A&M, but entered the transfer portal. And I think that's an interesting point what you brought up with Goodwin. I think they do have a little bit to sell there too. Not only from a spot of where they're getting some of these guys ready for the NFL, like a TJ Sanders, who could potentially, if he goes to the draft, be a high draft pick. But I got like Monkel Goodwin, who didn't have many stats at Alabama, but came in and I thought this year probably pretty solid when he came in there and showed and I think what Trey Robertson can do with those defensive tackles and help develop them. So there's still they still have a little bit of stuff there, and I think Trey Robertson, the guys are really going after this guy right now, and we'll see kind of down the line what other visits pop up from him, or if he go ahead and locks it down. But haven't heard one way or the other yet on that way. But it sounds like things went well on the visit.
All right, so two other defensive tackles. Jared Dawson from Louisville, 6'2", 305. He is a guy the Gamecocks have interest in. And then David Blay, 6'4", 303 from Louisiana Tech. Very productive guy. What are you hearing on these guys? And again, look, there are going to be plenty more wide receivers, plenty more running backs, plenty of defensive tackles and linebackers that are going to be going into the transfer portal. These are the guys that are already in. That's why we're talking about them. I kind of like Blay a little better than Dawson, but Dawson's played a ton of snaps at Louisville. And quite frankly, why not? If you could add 3 transfer portal defensive tackles, I'd do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely would too. And I kind of feel the same way. I'm really intrigued by Blay, a guy who at Louisiana Tech, I think he was a first-team All-Conference USA performer this year, 10.5 tackles for loss, and I think 6.5 sacks. I mean, a guy who kind of looks like from that size standpoint at 6'4", 303, they kind of need that size in there. And I think, those two guys, he and Jared Dawson would be two that, we'll see kind of how visits line up, if they end up coming to Columbia for a visit. But, I think it's two guys that you keep an eye on at least, especially, Blay with what he's done at Louisiana Tech, and a guy who's a redshirt junior. So I think he's a guy who really to keep an eye on, and we'll see kind of how the visits shake out with those two.
No doubt. So one of my favorite players in the transfer portal, I think, is either wrapping up his visit this morning or wrapped up last night. And that is linebacker Andrew Jones from Grambling. 6'2", 220, just a tackling machine. Quick twitch, explosive, fast. I believe he started his career at Memphis. He was the SWAC co-defensive player of the year, well over 120 tackles. The Gamecocks have a great story to tell when you're losing basically your 3 starting linebackers, and you got J.R. Johnson and Jaron Willis, and those may be the only 2 scholarship guys that are back. I know you're bringing in some, but I think South Carolina really needs to hit 2 or 3 portal linebackers. I was disappointed when Josiah Trotter went off the board. He was one of my favorites all the way going back to high school. He's going to Missouri. J.C. Sherbert had a post on the Big Spur saying he really was not a high priority for South Carolina. That tells me that there's some dudes out there that the Gamecocks have to be involved with, and one of them we know is Andrew Jones. Not to be confused
Andrew Jones
with the Braves' future Hall of Fame center fielder, Andrew Jones.
Yeah. When Andrew Jones first went in the portal, I was, one that I was really intrigued by, just because he really kind of just exploded this year at Grambling State at 122 tackles, 20.5 for a loss and 3 sacks, like co-defensive player of the year and first team all SWAC. Like, it's a guy who, 6'2", 220 is a little bit lighter than Demetrius Knight was, but, same size as the 6'2", and I think could be a perfect kind of fit for what that linebacker room looks like. Guy who can get sideline to sideline and, came in for a visit. And I think there's a lot of teams that want this guy just from what he did at Grambling State. And it's really going to be fun to watch to see how this recruitment shakes out. But it's a guy who I think a lot of teams want because of the speed that he shows. And then just the stats, like 122 tackles at any level is really insane, especially with 20.5 tackles for loss.
No doubt. So it looks like the Gamecocks may finally take a cornerback in the transfer portal. They've got Miles Norwood from Ball State lined up to come in, 6'1", 183. On his X profile, he lists himself as 6'3", so maybe 6'1.5" or 6'2", but Gamecocks did not sign a high school corner in this class. I think you really love Vakari Swain. You love Judge Collier. Not a whole lot behind them. I think the Gamecocks really need to add a guy. Look, I'm not taking anything away from Jalewis Solomon. Certainly, I know how much the staff loves him. He will be a factor at corner next year. Emory Floyd will be back. But if you could add a productive guy at that position, I think that would be ideal.
Yeah, especially a guy like Miles Norwood, who from a size standpoint really fits what they're kind of looking for, that 6'1", 183 size. And a guy who, this year had 22 tackles, or 22 solo tackles, 38 total, and broke up 8 passes. And you kind of mentioned it, I think when you look at the depth chart for next year, you think, all right, that Judge is probably going to take that number 1 spot. Vakari Swain's going to take Judge Collier's spot. And I think that's actually a really solid 1-2 combo from what you've seen so far from those guys. But then behind them, Jalewis Solomon's still going to be young, but the potential is there, and the staff really, really likes him, especially coming out of high school. They're really, really high on him. But I think there's potential there. But if you could bring in a guy like Miles Norwood, who has experience at the college level, to come in and help those guys and be maybe a number 3, or if he went to starting spot, I think you would absolutely take that.
No doubt about it. You may be replacing Nick Eamon-Warry next year. I think, you could slide Jalen Kilgore in at that free safety spot, and then, add a Jalewis Solomon or Miles Norwood or somebody like that right into that nickel spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peyton Williams as well. A guy who has shown some flashes as well at South Carolina could come in and take one spot. Jalen Kilgore's had a fantastic year this year, coming off of his freshman year last year. That was really solid. And so they have some options there at safety if Nick Eamon-Warry does, in fact, go ahead and go to the NFL draft. So, and it's going to be, and they got a guy, still some younger players at that spots too. Kelvin Hunter's one too. That could be one to watch as he continues to develop. David Busey's back there as well, as a guy who, on kickoff team this year was really fun to watch because he ran down hard and he was looking to hit somebody. And he plays the same way at safety too. So they have some depth there, but it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out with, potentially with Nick Eamon-Warry departing if he does decide to do that.
No doubt. So I guess the only 2 positions we really hadn't talked about is quarterback and place kicker. Alex Herrera is gone. Robbie Ashford's in the portal. Luke Doty does have another year of eligibility. I've always thought he should have stayed at quarterback, kind of a veteran guy at quarterback to be a backup, or a young guy that you could say, hey, Lenore Sellers may very well be going to the National Football League next year. Sit 1 year behind him, be quarterback number 2, and then it's your show. And at place kicker, essentially there's nobody except Max Kelly coming in, who will be a true freshman.
Yeah, I haven't heard any names for that spot so far, that place kicker spot, if they're looking at anybody in the transfer portal. But as you mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of names that continue to enter the portal, and they'll kind of mine the portal to see what they can do there. And at that quarterback spot, first of all, a lot of credit to Robbie Ashford for what he did this year. I mean, he came in and, always was cheering on his teammates. And when he came in for that Akron game in certain spots, he made the most of his time on the field. And, I think, for him, just going and find playing time. And I think is, the right decision for him. And, good luck to him, first of all, because I think he did everything he could for South Carolina. And, at that quarterback spot, obviously there hadn't been any names that have been put out there yet. We'll see who else pops in their portal, and maybe if they just kind of continue with Luke Doty there and see where they go from there. I would imagine they at least look in the portal to see who they can find there as that backup quarterback spot, though.
All right, so I got one Shrine Bowl question for you. So Anthony Addison from Sumter is listed as an edge player. Donovan Darden from Havelock is listed as a linebacker. I kind of think these guys are not listed correctly, because you look at Darden's film, 6'4", 225, he's going to get bigger. I think he really profiles more as an edge player. And to me, Anthony Addison at 6'3", 230, he could be the next Bam Martin Scott. What are your thoughts on that? They are playing him at linebacker at the Shrine Bowl, and he had a great first day up there, as did Darden.
Yeah. I think with Darden, you're right at that 6'4", 225. Like, maybe he could slide into that spot, bringing him in as a linebacker. But we kind of saw this year, think of a guy like Wendell Gregory, who they signed as a linebacker, and then kind of in preseason camp slid him to that edge spot. And so we'll see if they kind of do some moving around with those guys, because they do have some profiles. I think I like Addison as an edge just because of his, I was really impressed with his motor. But if he keeps growing, maybe you could see him slide back a little bit. But that'll be something that they decide kind of when these guys get on campus, and see how they continue to grow once they get into a college weight room.
All right, Alex, great stuff. I know you guys are all over this. Tell us what you got coming up on thebigspur.com.
Yeah, so we got Mike Shula press conference today at 1:00. The first time we'll get to hear from him as after being named offensive coordinator. So it's going to be interesting to see what he says on, Lenoris and, just landing the job and all that. And then we'll have player press conferences on Friday. That'll be the final one before Christmas, and then heading down to Orlando for the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. And so it's going to be continue to be busy as we continue to follow the transfer portal, recruiting, and obviously now basketball. Now after that win last night, the basketball teams got Radford on Sunday at 2:00. So always busy at the Big Spur, and that's going to be no different here as we get into Christmas and into the Citrus Bowl.
All right, my friend, Merry Christmas to you, and a very happy New Year, and we'll look forward to catching up with you in 2025.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Merry Christmas to you and everybody watching. So it's always enjoys being on with you, Keith.
All right. That goes for me. We'll look forward to catching up with you down the road. All right. That was Alex Jones from the Big Spur. Now let's bring in Jordan Kaye, number one in the Kenny Dillingham fan club.
Yes.
Proud alumnus of the Valley of the Sun, Arizona State Sun Devils in the college football playoff. Our guy, Jordan Kaye. Jordan, I know you were at that basketball game last night, or at least I'm assuming you were. What a wild and wacky game last night at the Colonial Life Arena.
That was awesome. Just a really fun game. I mean, aside from the ticky-tack fouls that were called on both sides, I thought it was one of the better college basketball games you'll see. I thought Shefflin and Colin Murray-Boyles were just monsters down low, and that was really fun to get to watch them kind of battle it mano-a-mano, and then for Chase Hunter to hit that shot and send it into overtime. That was awesome. Give credit, though, to South Carolina. I mean, when you get a shot like that against you, like, it's got to be really tough to respond, to rebound. And credit to Lamont Paris for getting his guys ready to go because they looked fantastic in the overtime period, most of which they played without Colin Murray-Boyle. So just an impressive day, and South Carolina needed that. I mean, they've already got 3 losses heading into conference play. If you had 4 losses with how tough the SEC is, it was going to be a pretty rough stretch to making the NCAA tournament. And all of a sudden you get a nice little, feather in the cap on Tuesday night. And the path is a little bit easier to make the NCAA tournament.
Well, and it just goes to prove South Carolina owns this state. I mean, it's a game that, quite frankly, should have never gone into overtime.
Sure.
You're starting backcourt. And as a former coach, if I had hair, I would have pulled it out last night because Jacoby Wright, who up until this year was like a career 90% free throw shooter, he bricks a pair of free throws with like 10 seconds left in the game.
Yeah.
Clemson goes down and scores. They cut the lead to 3. Even though South Carolina got an offensive rebound, they still didn't score. Jamari Thomas goes to the line with 4.5 seconds to go. He can only make 1 of 2. If he hits both of them, it's a 4-point lead. Game is over. He misses. Lamont Paris had called timeout to tell them to foul. Under 5 seconds, you always foul with a 3-point lead because you do not want them to have a shot to tie it. And, Clemson's best player, Chase Hunter, they just let him dribble the ball right down the court. Could have fouled him at midcourt. Instead, he just throws up 1 and banks in a 3, and the game goes to overtime. And not to mention Morris Ugasuk bricking a technical free throw about a minute earlier when Shefflin hung on the rim. Those are the kinds of things you just can't do. But I will say this, okay? Pat Adams and Joe Lindsey absolutely suck at officiating.
Yeah.
Pat Adams, anytime there's a Pat Adams game, there's probably going to be at least 40 fouls called.
Yeah.
And I thought that 5th foul call on Colin Murray-Boyles, who had clearly established himself in defensive position and drew a charge, and they called a block on him and fouled him out, not to mention the 4th foul they called on him when he's going parallel down the lane and the offensive player initiates the contact. That should have been a no call. I just thought those were 2 huge calls. South Carolina had to play the majority of the overtime without Colin Murray-Boyles, who, quite frankly, in front of all the NBA scouts that were there, Roy Philpott said, I think there were at least 11 different NBA teams present for that game. He goes for 22 points, 8 of 10 from the field, 6 of 6 from the free throw line, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 block shots and 1 steal. And he only got to play 28 minutes because of the foul trouble.
Yeah. I think there were some draft people who expected him to leave school after last year. Even when he had missed basically the first half of the year with mono, he comes back and kind of lights up the SEC at times. Had a great game in the first round of the SEC tournament. And coming into this season, I mean, you're kind of just wondering, like, what is that next step for him? I would like to see him shoot, like, get better at 3-point shooting, just in terms of I would assume that's what the NBA scouts want to see. But, man, last night is about as good as you can get. And the poise and confidence, I don't know if he would have had that last year to kind of just body Ian Shefflin in crunch time. just 2 dribbles, back him down, hook shot. I mean, it was like clockwork for Colin Murray-Boyles, and his progression has been just incredible to watch. I mean, the jump shot is the next development, but he's definitely got the poise, the footwork, the post moves, all that stuff that you want to see at the next level.
I mean, Lamont Paris kind of went to some NBA-style offense down the stretch and then overtime until he fouled out, just going isolation every single time. And he just went and got a bucket.
Yeah.
Or he passed out to somebody to get a bucket. Like I said, it drove me crazy. That game should have never gone into overtime.
Yeah.
Hunter hits that big shot, and you're like, oh, crap. But South Carolina made their first 5 field goals in the overtime. Finally made some free throws. And they hold on and win the game 91-88. They get their first quad 1 victory. I think this one kind of, I don't know if it cancels out that horrendous loss to North Florida or not, but you beat your in-state rival. They're a top 25 team, and it's a quad 1 win. I think, that's really critical. But I mean, not just Murray-Boyles, Miles Studi, who quite frankly has not had the best start to this season. He's 7 of 9 from the field and 5 of 7 from downtown. He had 19 points. And I really think Lamont Paris just really got pissed off at Zach Davis and took him out. They took Pringle out and went with a smaller lineup. Miles Studi at times was having to guard Ian Shefflin, which was not a favorable matchup for him. But he was swapping 3 for 2. Morris Ugasut, huge in the overtime, hitting a corner 3.
Yeah.
As was Studi to give the Gamecocks some breathing room. But Clemson came right back after the Gamecocks go up by 7 and hit back-to-back threes to cut it to 1. But in the end, South Carolina would not be denied. What was the atmosphere like? I know the students were gone. What was the crowd like, and what was the atmosphere in the building last night?
It was one of the better men's basketball crowds I've seen at Colonial Life, especially considering you're saying the students are gone. It wasn't like number 1 Kentucky or something like that. I mean, obviously the rivalry carries a lot of weight, but it wasn't like, hey, there's a chance for a court storming. And sometimes that's what the students get a little excited about. No, but it was awesome. When Nick Pringle had the alley-oop with about 4 minutes to go, I wrote it down of holy crap, this place is going to explode. And that was awesome. I mean, last year during those SEC games, the atmosphere in there was insane. I mean, they were almost selling out those 18,000 seats. They were getting butts in seats. And this year just hasn't been that. And a lot of that's just hey, it's still football season. You're playing mostly crappy non-conference teams. No one cares. And then obviously students are gone. So for them to draw, I don't know, I'd guess 14,000 people, pretty impressive. And you could tell, I mean, it was rattling Clemson at times for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see Nick Pringle really have a big-time game because he's kind of struggled early in the season as well as Miles Studi, but he goes for 18 points on 7 of 8 from the field.
Yeah.
Just 4 of 7 from the free throw line, but that's better than some games he's had. 4 rebounds, 2 assists. I thought he was really good. But, when you shoot over 50% from the field for the game, you make 7 threes, and you only commit 12 turnovers, you got to kind of like your chances, especially at home. It was close, primarily because of Chase Hunter and Ian Shefflin. Hunter goes off for 27 points, 5 of 8 from downtown. I mean, those misses must have been in the first half because I didn't see him miss one in the second half.
Yeah, he didn't score a single point in the first half.
Yeah. I mean, he was on a heater. I mean, if that guy would have been in Vegas, they would have changed dealers twice at the blackjack table. That guy just could not miss. I thought it was a great matchup between Shefflin and Colin Murray-Boyles. They went at each other all night long. Both put up really impressive numbers. Both fouled out. Clemson just really didn't have the third player that really stepped up. Zachary had 10 and Highbreeder had 10. But that was about it. For South Carolina, Zach Davis threw up a nothing burger. Cam Scott, a nothing burger. Those are two guys that the Gamecocks need to be productive, and it was just not their night. You could tell, Lamont Paris was very frustrated with Zach Davis, and he just sat him out. I mean, they went with like the same 5 guys like the last 4 minutes of regulation and the entire overtime. It might have even been longer than that. They really extended out the minutes with Jacoby Wright, Jamari Thomas, Studi, Colin Murray-Boyles, and Morris Ukasuk. Those were the guys that went the distance. After CMB fouled out, they brought Pringle back in, and then he fouled out. You were out there the last 30 seconds with the notorious BBV out there. Benjamin Bozeman's Verdonk. Clemson still had a chance. They had a guy at the free throw line with a chance to tie it. He missed the first and then tried to miss the second one and banked it in. A lot of teams don't work on that as much as they should, in my opinion. That was something we used to always work on that. And we would teach guys to aim for one corner of the line of the square. So it goes off the square and then hits the side of the rim and bounces up and out, which gives you the best chance. But
I was
in the end, just
no way he was trying to make that.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought the same thing. I was like, he was not trying to make that shot.
Yeah. A great win for Lamont Paris. You could tell he was frustrated by his team because they called timeout in between those free throws in regulation, telling them to foul. At one point, he was signaling to foul.
Yeah.
And, Jacoby Wright, I don't know. He just sometimes goes into a funk. I know the guy banked it in. It was a runner. It was about a 30-footer. But as hot as that guy was, it wasn't a miracle shot for him.
No.
He was just that hot. You got to foul, and you got to put him on the free throw line.
Yeah. I don't even know how that happens. And at some point, you got to blame the players of, how do you guys not huddle around, or one of the leaders make sure you look everyone in the eye? Hey, we're fouling, and just really emphasize the point. You can't have that guy get open. Like you're saying, like, it was a crazy shot, but it wasn't impossible. Like, it's not like they were, hey, we're going to let him have a one-arm heave from 75 feet. No, it was like, you gave the hottest guy basically a clear shot at the rim. Like those aren't exactly the incredible odds, but man, don't want to live with those.
And look, Jacoby Wright is a senior. Okay, it's not like that was Morris Ugasuk, who's a young player, or Cam Scott, who's a true freshman. Okay, that was just a guy not doing what he was told to do. Lamont Paris in the postgame talked about it. You know, I mean, there was no question that was the strategy. And, you know, coaches can only do so much. He can't go out there and foul him, just like he can't make a free throw. Don't miss 3 out of 4 free throws in the final 10 seconds of regulation. Don't miss a technical foul free throw shoot. Free shot.
Yeah.
But a great win nonetheless. Gamecocks go to 8-3. They jump 15 spots in the net. I think now they've kind of got some easy games before conference play, which is going to be brutal. But hopefully this is a big confidence builder for this team and for guys like Miles Studi and Nick Pringle and even Morris Ugasuk, who has struggled at times. Jacoby Wright did hit for 9 points, but 0 for 2 from the free throw line from a guy coming into this season was a 90% free throw shooter. They mentioned on the broadcast he was only 73% so far this year. You got to sharpen the saw on those things. It's the little things that make a big difference in college basketball.
Especially when SEC play is right on the horizon. I mean, you look right now, the SEC is the best basketball conference in the country. And South Carolina, before last night, had the worst record of all 16 SEC teams. The SEC might get 13 teams into the NCAA tournament. And as of Tuesday, I mean, South Carolina wasn't one of those. So there's a lot to clean up, and you're not going to get a really easy path over the backstretch of the season. So those, I assume, just as it was last year, there's going to be a lot of close games, and it comes down to who's more detailed, who's more disciplined in the last minute, 2 minutes.
I mean, Jordan, no doubt about it. I mean, you just cannot miss clutch free throws. You cannot allow a guy like Chase Hunter to have that wide, you know, to have threes. I mean, some of those threes in the second half, you have to chase him off the line, no pun intended. You know, Dawn Staley, who was courtside, she has a saying when they face great three-point shooting teams, we're not going to let them three us. We're going to make them to us. And that's getting guys off the line. And South Carolina didn't do that. I mean, as hot as that guy was, every time I'm trying to run him off the line. I'm just not giving him a three with any room to spare.
Yeah. I mean, that's you coach basketball. That's probably something you work on the first week.
I mean, you work on it, pressure free throw situations, end of game situations once you get into the season. And even when you're ramping up before, you know, when you're in your scrimmages and your practices leading into the season, you have to cover every conceivable scenario with your team and reinforce it by doing it every day in practice, so that a guy realizes, hey, under 5 seconds, I got a foul. Okay. Free throws. You know, all you can do is put guys in pressure situations. So Gamecocks, not perfect, Still got a ways to go, but I thought really big for Miles Studi and Nick Pringle on that big of a stage in a rivalry game to really come out and equip themselves extremely well, along with Colin Murray Boyles, who's clearly the go-to guy on this team.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so yesterday, Board of Trustees, they give out contract extensions and new contracts for all 10 assistants. They officially promote Mike Shula to offensive coordinator. First, your thoughts on that? And I'm sure we'll find out at the press conference, but like I said last week, I just don't see how Dow Loggins can recruit for the transfer portal, retain his roster, hire his staff, and spend 2 weeks in Columbia coaching bowl practice and then a week in Orlando with the team. That makes no sense to me.
I don't think it's going to happen. Like there's no way. I think that was something you say as like a nice little gesture, but the logistics are impossible. If I would be shell shocked if he was doing that. No, he's got to put together a staff, go to the portal. It sounds great to be like, I'm going to really ride this out. And then you start thinking about it like, actually, that kind of sucks. So, yeah, that's probably not going to happen.
I mean, look, maybe he could join the team in Orlando and, be a consultant or an analyst, be one of the guys up in the press box that he could, lend an extra set of eyes to. I don't know if that happens or not. For me, Appalachian State, it's not like when Eli Drinkowitz took over, when Scott Satterfield left to go to Louisville. Yeah. Eli Drinkowitz came in there. They had an all-conference quarterback. They had most of their players back. They were essentially undefeated before that happens. And, now you're expecting somebody else, right?
Yeah.
I like the move of promoting Shula, and I just don't think you can serve two masters. And Dow Loggins is not taking over a loaded program that's coming off like a 12-1 season. He's coming in there because the guy was not winning and got fired. To me, if it's me, all my focus is going on recruiting, transfer portal, roster retention, and putting my staff together.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to happen.
I agree. So any thoughts on the promotion of Mike Shula? I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. But I want to get your take on Mike Shula stepping in to that OC position.
Yeah, I think it'll work. I mean, he knows the offense. He understands the personnel they have. He knows Lenora Sellers. Now, I've seen him during camps interact with kids. So, I mean, it seems like he's at least comfortable recruiting. I'm always a little skeptical when it doesn't seem like there was actually a search, when it was just a quick little promotion. But perhaps there were things going on behind the scenes. Shane Beamer taking calls, making calls to different candidates saying, hey, would you be interested? Would you not? Maybe he had 2 or 3 guys in his head and they all declined or something. Just anytime like a promotion of this magnitude comes together so quickly, I'm like, man, like was there interviews? Was there other candidates? Was there even a search? Things like that always jump out to me. But I mean, as far as the football wise, I've only heard good things about Mike, and it's not like a a random candidate. It is a guy who has good relationships with people, understands the offense, is a good football mind. So, there are positives.
I agree. I think there may have been one guy out there, but I think he's already got his next gig lined up. And so I think here's the thing. You got Lenora Sellers coming back. I think you have to ask him because he is that guy. You got 5 high school wide receivers coming in for bowl practice. All of the wide receivers that are signed are in. I think the last thing you wanted is to put everybody through bowl practices and then in January change the terminology and change your system. So I like the continuity, and Mike Shula, you want to talk about a resume, played quarterback at Alabama, coached at Alabama, ended up being replaced by a guy named Nick Saban, but has spent 30 years in the National Football League, grooming quarterbacks, calling plays in successful offenses. I think it is a great move. So, all right. So, last question, because I know you got to get rolling.
Yeah.
So, have you seen the Despicable Me movies?
I seen the first one.
All right. So, were you at the press conference when Michael Amaritis introduced Jeremiah Donati as athletic director?
Yeah.
Close your eyes and replay that. Amaritis sounds exactly like Gru. Tell me I'm wrong. I mean,
you're not wrong. I'm never going to be able to get that out of my head.
All right. Hey,
God. That's crazy.
Tell us what you got coming up on Go Gamecocks and at the state.
Yeah, obviously the Mike Shula press conference today. We'll have some player features coming out either this week or after the bowl. And then leading up to the bowl game, we'll have a kind of a look back. It's the 30-year anniversary of the first ever bowl win by South Carolina, the 1994-95 CarQuest Bowl. I had not realized that South Carolina was 0-8 leading up to that game. So talk to some players about that, just of a 30-year anniversary of, finally winning a bowl game. It's pretty cool.
Steve Tannehill.
Yeah. Beating West Virginia and Miami.
That's right. That was,
I think, Don Shula, I think, had a playoff game the day before or 2 days before. Same place.
How about that?
Guess who the quarterback matchup was? Dan Marino versus Joe Montana on the Chiefs.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
That's pretty awesome. And Vern Lundquist was on the call for that game.
I think it was Vern and Dan Fouts.
Dan Fouts, that's right. Vern Lundquist and Dan Fouts on the call.
How do you remember that?
Steve Tannehill to Buster Foster for the game-winning touchdown.
Yes.
That was
a
hell of a game.
Yeah. The Boomer Foster touchdown was like the first quarter, and then they I think they kind of beat him off after that.
It still got interesting at the end. They broke out I think South Carolina broke off a long run and then fumbled, and West Virginia had the ball at the end of the game.
You would have been going nuts for about a week about this. All they had to do was knee the ball, and they decide to run it, and they fumble in the end zone. And West Virginia has the ball with like 1:30 left. And, I mean, if they lost that game, Brad Scott on the hot seat.
All right, so good luck to your Sun Devils.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas and
Merry
Happy
Christmas.
New Year. Enjoy Orlando. And thanks for being so gracious with your time, and
of course,
look forward to catching up with you in 2025.
Appreciate you, sir. Have a good one.
All right, you too. All right, that was Jordan Kaye from Go Gamecocks and the state. And so I did have some worthy headlines to go through. We did mention Rocket Sanders, named one of 3 comeback players of the year in college football. Shane Beamer, one of 6 finalists for the Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year Award. He's also up for the Eddie Robinson National Coach of the Year Award. Dylan Stewart, named Pro Football Focus Freshman All-American. 3 Gamecocks named to the Football Writers Association of America All-American Team. That was Nick Emanwari on the first team, and Kyle Kennard and punter Kai Kroger on the second team. Also, Asia Wilson signing a 6-year historic deal with Nike. Her A1 brand will debut this spring prior to the WNBA season. Her deal ranks among the highest paid shoe endorsement deals in the sport, alongside the 8-year, $20 million deal Caitlin Clark got. Juju Watkins and Sabrina Ionescu have deals. And Wilson already in her 7th season, a 3-time MVP, should have been 4-time MVP. She's won Defensive Player of the Year multiple times as well, and the only unanimous MVP since Cynthia Cooper in 1997. Of course, the most highly decorated student athlete in the history of the University of South Carolina. And I'll leave you with this one. In the grass is not always greener department, Ohio State guard Meechie Johnson, who started his career at Ohio State, did nothing, came to South Carolina for 2 years, flourished under Lamont Paris, went back to Ohio State. He has taken an absence, a leave of absence from the Buckeye basketball program. And so, Craig, I completely agree with you. CMB has got to look, when you get Pat Adams, man, you can just be in somebody's zip code and that dude's going to call a foul. He is, to quote Charles Barkley, terrible. Way too many fouls called, and quite frankly, some total BS foul calls, I thought, on both teams. Mark says the basketball team will continue to sputter until they stop making complete bonehead mistakes. I agree. Should have won the game by 10. Too many turnovers. You know, look, we got spoiled last year with Talon Cooper. I mean, that dude had ice water in his veins. He's 6'4", 220. He was unbelievable on both ends of the court. Jamari Thomas is not that guy. He's 5'11". He was 2 for 11 from the field. He's not making free throws. Jacoby Wright, I mean, like I said, you missed 3 out of 4 field goals in the last 10 seconds of the game. Even you get a bailout and get Miles Studi getting an offensive rebound after Jacoby Wright bricks 2 free throws. Thomas then only hits 1. And you don't foul and let Chase Hunter get off that 3. That was a totally boneheaded move. All right, so that is going to be a wrap for me. This will most likely, barring some big-time portal pickups, be the final Gamecock Pod Live of the year, as next Wednesday will be Christmas. But we'll be back in early January of 2025. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and Happy New Year to all of you. Thanks for tuning in. God bless, and go Gamecocks. I'm out of here.